Welcome to the HR on the Offensive podcast, a weekly podcast by Lace Partners, a fundamentally different HR and payroll consultancy. Each week, we tackle some of the most interesting topics facing senior HR professionals. So whether that's from employee value proposition, performance management, people strategy, or even payroll, we cover it all. So join us for the next 30 minutes. And if you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Now, on with the show. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the latest HR on the Offensive podcast. It's me, Chris Howard, coming to you as always. It is the HR on the Offensive podcast, but we're doing it in a payroll light because we're shining the light on payroll today. We like to do this quite a lot because it's a big part of the world that we live in at Lace Partners. And today, exciting topic. It's the evolution of payroll. So what we wanted to do is do a little bit of what do we think is coming? What's coming down the road? What's the future of payroll looking like? Now, we've done a few of these with different people over the years, but because the world is changing, because the payroll world is changing, we always like to do a bit of a check-in with somebody a bit different, get their perspectives, get somebody who's been in the industry for a significant amount of time to talk to us about the evolution and what they see as well. Now, I'm going to introduce our guest in a moment, but as always, it's a co-host I need, and coming on down today, it's Tricia Conway from our payroll team. Trish, you all right?
Yes, I'm very good.
Looking forward to this one.
I am, yeah, very much.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Should be interesting to get into our guest's perspective on the evolution of payroll. And that guest is Ian Giles. He is the Global Payroll Director at Dayforce. Ian, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you today?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. We're going to get into, obviously, the details of that. And I'm going to get you to explain a little bit about who you are. But when you said, how are you doing today? I'm going to link that to our fundamentally different question, because I'm a little bit sad because of the time of recording. It is a beautiful 30-degree day outside. And the three of us are indoors. Before we get you to explain who you are and what you do, and Dayforce as well, before getting into the topic, we're going to do that traditional, fundamentally different, not related to payroll question. And my question, which I'll give Ian a little bit of time to have a think about it. So I'm going to start with Trish and then I'll go. But Trish, it's a beautiful day. If you could be outside in your garden right now and doing something that you wouldn't normally do, what would it be?
I think I would be painting something. I see lots of different trends of things to do in the garden with painting, whether it's like furniture or pots, or just to bring a bit of colour into it. And there's too much work to do in the garden, so I never get to do the sort of nice bits. So that would be nice to just stop the work in the garden and actually do something.
I like that. I really like that. The thing is, if I said painting to my wife, she would say, that shed out there needs another coat. And that is not something.
That's exactly what I mean. The opposite of that.
Something fun.
Something fun, exactly.
And my fun thing would be a game of boules or pétanque, I think the French call it, or maybe the French call it boules. But anyway, in my shed, I have a rapidly gathering dust set of balls, which I would take out and have a game of. Ian, what's your thing that you'd do that's a little bit different in the garden?
It's a little bit different to most people, but it's something that I actually do a fair amount of the time. Not many people know this about me, but I'm actually a diploma-owning beekeeper. So I would get out in the garden and I would actually watch them go about their business. Absolutely fascinating. And the reason that I actually got hives was because I'm a hay fever sufferer. So I got some bees to help that. People think that honey is a cure for hay fever. It's a nice kind of myth, but it's not a medicine. It does alleviate the symptoms and that kind of thing. But again, it's not a medicine. So watching them is like a happy place to me. And I can't help but tie everything that I do into payroll and into business in one way or another. And to me, bees basically are pollinating project managers, and you watch what they do and all of that kind of thing. And if you really think about it, 1 in 3 bites of food actually come from bee pollination. They travel up to 5 miles every single time to collect pollen. And it might not seem like a lot, but that's basically like somebody traveling from London to Berlin to get groceries and then come back again. And they do that several times a day. In a lifetime, a bee can travel 525 miles. They don't live for very long. And that doesn't sound like a huge amount of things, apart from when you put it into human miles, and that's 95,500 miles. And I love facts. So there we go.
Blimey. Wow. Bees that travel more than my Audi has done in 5 years.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Anyway, let's move on to the topic at hand. And full disclaimer to those of you wonderful people that are listening in, Ian and myself had a bit of a chat, brainstorming session about the sort of things that we could talk about. And we had a really good chat, which I then said, let's do on the podcast, Ian, which is around the changing role of business, but how payroll is no different as well. So I guess let's start with a nice open question, just bringing the listener into that conversation, if that's all right, Ian. So I'll start off with you and then I'll let Trish ask a few questions as well. But let's talk a little bit around what we discussed when we talked about this idea of the multi-generational workforce and what are businesses and particularly payroll teams, what do they need to think about? So do you want to just bring that out a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And it's one that I'm thinking about and talking about all the time, even with yourself a little while ago. We are now dealing with 5 generations in the workplace, and soon there are going to be 6 of them. And in some instances, there are 6 already when you think about part-time jobs, earning yourself a little bit more than pocket money and that kind of stuff. The eldest people within Generation Alpha are turning 15 years old this year. And if that actually doesn't make you think that you've been working in this industry for longer than some of them have been alive, I think we need to understand every single one of those generational values. Not every Generation Z wants crypto in their payslip, and not every boomer wants a payslip that comes out in paper off a printer and all of that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, boomers and Gen X want security, reliability, and clarity. Millennials want convenience, tech, and transparency. And then Gen Z, they want everything and instantly now. And that's on the way. It definitely is coming. So we need to think about offering a range of communication, access channels. At the end of the day, I think flexibility and be able to cater for every single one of those generations is going to be what helps win.
Do you know what? It's really interesting what you were just saying there about the different things that different generations want. So can we pick at that a little bit? Because what do businesses, I guess my question is, what do businesses need to actually do? Because if I'm thinking about this from we've got a 10,000 person workforce point of view, and we've got people that fit into certain buckets. We have a broad assumption that the people of this kind of bucket, they're looking for this type of thing, job security. The people in this type of bucket are looking for training development opportunities. What sort of things do you think businesses need to be thinking of in terms of the way in which they break that down? Are we talking about multiple different employee value propositions for every single segment of the workforce? Because that starts to feel a little bit complex. Have you got any just general thoughts around what businesses need to be doing, and any kind of, do they just need to flip the traditional methods of reward, or how does that need to change?
So it can be difficult, it can be complex, and there are going to be smaller businesses that won't necessarily be able to afford it today, but they're going to be able to afford it in the very, very near future as we have more access to partners providing that kind of service. And if it's not something you can do yourself, there are great partnerships out there where you can get benefits, insurance, gym memberships, and all of those kind of things. To me, I think we need to create omni-channel accessibility. I think in its simplest terms, rather than actually offering everything that you possibly can, making it pick and mix scenario, I think for the position, the tenure, the salary, and all of those kind of things, why not offer an amount of money for people to actually go out and, like I say, but make it easy, have a pick and mix things. Me at my age, I am definitely more interested in the pension side of things than somebody who's 20, 25 years old. And I don't particularly personally have a particular interest in gym memberships or pet insurance and that kind of thing, where other generations would. I think if you want to become a destination employer today, you need to be offering as much as you possibly can within your ability.
And I've just taken it back a little bit, Ian, from what you were saying before, everything following. I've got multiple things that are going around in my head about what's needed in the skill set. You're talking about knowing the different generations that are going to be working within payroll. What does that skill set look like? To Chris's question about what do organisations need to do, you've got the two things, haven't you? So there's knowing all of those different generations, but then what do organisations have to do to look at the skill set requirement across those different generations as well?
To me, it's many-fold, and these are the kind of things that I'm talking about all the time. And part of the conversation I've had with Chris and I've had with lots of people are, what does the payroll team look like today compared to what it used to? If we only go back 5 years, we saw that mass exodus due to COVID, where payrollers were in a position where the government would actually change national insurance contributions on a Thursday, and we were expected to have them in the payroll on a Friday morning. People were leaving in droves. The amount of work they had to do for what they were getting paid was absolutely unrealistic, particularly when you think about the other jobs that they could do with no responsibility for people's financial undertakings and all of those kind of things. They could quite literally go and work in supermarkets on the tills or replenishing shelves and that kind of thing without all of the hassle. So I think we need to actually look at what we have and what we are potentially going to lose. I know people who have been in the industry for 40, 50 years. I've been in it for 25 years plus myself. When we all start leaving the industry, and I'm not saying that I'm about to do that today or tomorrow or in the very, very near future, we are going to take decades of war stories and payroll wisdoms with us. So we have got to look at what that payroll contingency plan looks like. How do we market payroll to become a function within a business where people really do want to work? It's one of very few, if not the only function within the business that touches every single employee, every single pay cycle. So we have got to get ourselves into a place where it is attractive, where we need to start shining the light on it. Those lights are there in marketing, in sales, and all of those kind of things now because they are revenue generating. Okay, so payroll spends a lot of money. We don't necessarily bring it in, but without payroll, there would be no businesses.
I want to pick at this a little bit because this is quite interesting. You were talking about almost the risks, and I'm quite interested to get your take. And actually, we'll go with Ian first, but Tricia, your take as well around, do you think that payroll as a function has more risks associated with losing that expertise than other functions? So you talked about marketing, you talked about as leaders leave the business and we lose that expertise, do you think payroll is potentially going to be more adversely affected than other functions, or do you just think it's this is more a business-wide issue?
I think it's a payroll and a business issue. If we just go back to the bits that we were saying about people leaving the industry after years and years in the profession, we are staring at a potential knowledge vacuum. It's not just a people problem. It's a strategic nightmare for businesses. If you cannot have the right people paying your employees, then again, there is going to be no business. Regulatory knowledge is a lived experience. Losing long-term payroll leaders means risks in gap of local legislation, collective agreements. We might not have them in the UK, but if you look around the rest of the world, CBAs are dominant. Reporting and risk mitigation practices don't just happen overnight. And we are probably, the longer we've been in the business, the more we are actually our own worst enemy. Payroll processes generally are not documented, and definitely not as much as we might like to think. They're very tribal. There's something that we've made ourselves, we want to keep for ourselves, we don't want to share, and all of that kind of stuff. So when we leave the industry, things are going to break.
Yeah, Tricia, I see some wry smiles there, so I want to get your views on this. Go on.
It was when Ian said that we're tribal. It was really funny.
We are.
Because it's so true. So I think there's two, not two risks, but I think I could split it into two different categories around the risk. I think one is on technology, and then I'll put in brackets AI, but no, we're not going to have a full-on AI conversation here again. I think as you look down, obviously technology moves faster and there is the AI element. And I think if there's not a reliance on it, we haven't got a reliance on it now, but if there's a reliance when businesses are looking forward to say, oh yeah, but in 10 years time, that's going to be done by technology or by AI, or in 15, 20, however however long that prediction is, then there's a risk of not building in the SME knowledge that you need in payroll. And then the other side is, as Ian's touched on already, is careers in payroll. So because people have entered into payroll at administrator level, which is that if you project forward, and the technology piece is the piece that could potentially be affected in its day-to-day, not saying that role is non-existent, but affected in what they do in that role, then you're not covering the career in payroll. So you need to balance the two. What's technology going to do? Then look at the careers path. What does that look like? And put the two together and somehow come up with where you need your SMEs. But I think with people who've been in the industry for as long as we have, and we can sit back and think of manual calculations and things like that, which you still do. People still ask, with friends or relatives, it'll still ask that it involves you to do that manual calculation piece. It's okay, when does that disappear? But then that's a different generation of people. I'm saying that actually, but young people asked me just a couple of weeks ago, a niece. So it's all of that balancing in together, the career side, the technology side, and then so you just, as a risk, where are the SMEs and at what level?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to go a little bit further with there, I've had lots of conversation and I've read lots of articles. I wouldn't say it was just payroll, but obviously we're talking about payroll and there is a big problem there. I've had these conversations about what's going on in Big Four practices over the next few years or so. And the conversation is going along the lines of the fact that there will be no graduate positions within the next 5 years. And I think that is going to be very much the same, not from a graduate point of view, but from a junior payroll position point of view. And I'm sure we're going to get onto it a little while, but it is evolving. It's a really exciting time to look and sit back at where we were. My first payroll was a weekly payroll, and it was 500,000 keystrokes a week, Monday to Wednesday, 2 days worth of reporting on Thursday and Friday, for nobody to actually even bother to read them. We have moved along a great deal within that period of time, and it is a really exciting point in time for payroll at the moment, I think.
Yeah, I think actually I want to segue into this, and I feel like Tricia's probably got a question on this because I'd love to dig into that kind of career pathways thing, particularly starting at that kind of junior level. Like we did a live stream with the guys at JGA a couple of months back where we were talking about this idea of the payroll clerk role is just going to disappear because AI is going to automate it. So I don't want to actually steal your thunder here, Trish, because I know you've got some thoughts on this and you probably got a question. So I'm going to pause there and let you just jump in, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. It just because it brought to mind a client conversation just last week, and it's one that I've had with a few now, but it was just top of mind because it was just at the back end last week. The job titles. So I just wanted to get your thoughts, Ian, on, okay, if you say traditionally a payroll administrator, and let's say that role does change, along with others, with technology and AI, what do they become? We have things like data handler and what do you see that being?
So I do think that junior roles will die off as we know them today, but it is going to bring great opportunities in huge droves. With zero-touch payroll becoming the norm and being more so on the horizon, we are going to feature as needed. I think you need to think of the payroll calendar as becoming more of a monitoring exercise than it's ever been before. AI is going to do what we want it to at this moment in time. AI is only in its first stage of 3, and it's doing what we tell it to. At a point in time, it is going to really learn from that, and it is going to be doing what we want it to do. But we are still going to need to be there as humans, as that audit, as that governance, which is how the roles are going to evolve. Governance is definitely going to grow teeth. I think dedicated payroll ethics professionals, greater transparency, improvement in employee-facing pay bots and that kind of stuff. AI is going to make the decisions whilst humans build the frameworks for guiding fairness, bias, and accountability. So in essence, payroll is going to be very much more lean than it ever has been. It's going to be data-led. It will be proactive and not reactive. It's going to be embedded in business strategy more than it ever has done before. I think the job titles are going to come along and that they are going to inevitably change, but we are definitely not going to need spreadsheet surfers if we want to talk job titles and that kind of thing. It's going to become hybrid. So I think what we're going to see is the strategic storytelling expert. That's what we're going to be. So compliance and strategy have always played high in terms of rank when it comes to payroll. So look out for global compliance analysts, statutory risks leads. Then when you look at integrations and vendor ecosystem, architecture will become even more important. So think solutions-based roles, vendor strategists, and those kind of things. And then when it comes to data, it's going to be about spotting trends and turning them into insights. So think payroll intelligence officers, payroll BI managers, and that kind of thing. It's going to be more the techie audit governance side of things, like I say, rather than somebody sitting there with 2 sheets of paper and a highlighter and a ruler like I used to.
Yeah, so I want to there's 2 ways we can go in this direction. And I do want to touch about the further up the sort of food chain, if you like, talking about like those senior roles, because you talked about the strategy and that side. But actually, this feels like a skills for the future angle that we can talk about. So the types of skills that payroll professionals of the future that are entering into, and actually I'll get your view on this as well, Trish, because I know you obviously do a lot of work with CIPP and the courses and you do the examination stuff and things like that. So it'd be really interesting to get your view. But as our guest, we'll let Ian go first, so he can answer all of the questions and leave you with nothing to follow up on. Ian, the types of skills that you think that people entering into a world of payroll need to be thinking about, and I feel like you've touched on some of that already with the storytelling and bits like that, but do you want to just pluck out any bits specifically that if somebody's listening in to this is thinking these are the types of skills that you need to be thinking about if you want to get into this industry?
I can see people shaking and punching their screens already, but I do think if you get in early enough, you can teach payroll and you can teach all kinds of things. To me, it's more about the people skills, emotional stuff, turning up to work, getting things done, obviously not burning yourself out and all of that kind of stuff, but an interest, a passion, a wanting to learn, and all of those kind of things are really important. Anybody who thinks payroll is 9 to 5 might as well go shopping for another job now, because that's definitely not the case. And when you get into global payroll, it really will not be the case. I'm not operational now, but I can still be in meetings at 6 o'clock in the morning if I'm working with anybody in APAC and APJ. And if I'm working with anybody in San Francisco and on that coast, I've got a meeting in my calendar until midnight Sunday next week, because that's the way that it goes. So I think passion is really important, and that is that's where I would go. If Tricia wants to add in kind of the qualifications, the education and all of that kind of stuff, then absolutely great. But I think payroll is becoming more people and employee centric than it's ever done before. So that's where I see real value.
Yeah, Trish?
And on the qualifications piece, it's interesting to what I see now, and then as CIPP build out continuously new qualifications, but specifically one that's changing at the moment. We have different modules, and as you go through the years, say the final year, the year 3, you get far more strategic in the assignments, right? It becomes very interesting and challenging to the students in a positive way, in that it is starting to make them think far less about BAU operations, real sort of transactional activities, and into that strategic thinking. And it's nice to see, it's nice to watch that play out, really. A struggle for some, admittedly, but like I say, positive. And I think it's going to be continuously interesting in that space to see, okay, so what do all those qualifications look like? That's quite the task, right, to say, because these are all different levels as well, so from diplomas and certificates to degrees and masters. What's that going to look like? That's really interesting, because it's got to obviously appeal. So going back to your point, Ian, about you need a passion for it, so they've got to be appealing qualifications as well. They've got to contain the right things at the right level. Everything that we've talked about this afternoon on the different skill sets required, but also what people are interested in. That's an awful lot to think about and incorporate into a sensible qualification that's moving all the time as well. I find that interesting to see that play out as well.
Absolutely. Not that I have any intention of going back and doing it all over again, but you have reminded me that I actually took my degree in 2015 and 16. I managed to get away with the first year because of years of experience, but it would be interesting to see what that 9 or 10 years looks like in terms of the involvement. And you're right that the third year is more about the strategy, the business operations, how you work with other functions and that kind of thing. And I think that is really going to become really important. If payroll wants a seat at the strategic table, it needs to be a strategic partner to the rest of the business.
Yeah, and that's we've got about 3 minutes, 4 minutes left to touch on my final question. That last bit that you said, the seat at the strategic table, because we had a really interesting chat around this idea of a chief payroll officer, didn't we, Ian, when we spoke
Yes, we
before? Do you want to just, rather than me just replay your words, do you want to just give me some thoughts here? Because we started talking about some of the other chief officers that are out there. And so give our listeners a little bit. And then Trish, I want to get your comments on this as well, just before we wrap up.
Absolutely. Firstly, I'd like to say that payroll doesn't need pacifying. We're not throwing our toys out of the pram because everybody else has got achieved something or other. But I do feel that chief payroll officer really becomes before chief happiness officer and all the other titles that have been flying around since the outbreak of COVID and that kind of thing. To me, it's about recognizing that payroll isn't an afterthought. It's a fully integrated, very much so value driving engine within a business. And it deserves this C platform to be truly transformational. I don't think it is at this moment in time. There are lots of people doing great things, but I don't think sitting under HR or finance is where we are going to see absolutely true value. I've been an advocate of this for the last 3 years or so, and I've been talking about it for that period of time. But I do feel that it being done the wrong way has more potential to make the CPO branded as a gimmick. And I'd hate to see that. I'd hate to see the very first person with that title seem to be that. It's not the way in the direction that we want it to go. So those that get the job title needs to be people that can orchestrate global business services, not just somebody that wants to advocate payroll, but somebody is really going to get into it and doing it. I do also think that a standalone CPO risks payroll becoming more siloed than it potentially is now in some businesses. And I see that definitely from a global point of view. And it's something that we're trying to break away very hard from. Payroll is, and if it's going to thrive, it needs to be this strategic function. It needs to be embedded in a much broader framework. So think HR, ops, time and attend, benefits, pensions, vendor management, workforce, analytics, and tech. And not every senior payroll leader has exposure to that or has had exposure to that. So the person needs to be somebody that can own the strategy, drive tech enablement, oversee compliance, enhance service delivery, and all of those kind of things. Payroll is a vital pillar in a structure, but it's not the entire building. That's the way that I like to think of it. So I do wonder, and again, people are going to shake the screens and punch them all the rest of it. Are we talking more of a chief shared services officer or a chief payroll intelligence officer?
Trish, final word on that then. You see a chief payroll officer of the future? You see a chief shared services officer of the future? What do you think?
And I thought I did. I thought we're going to take us back a little bit and I'll keep it brief. I thought we did really well over COVID. And I was so thinking, okay, here is payroll time to shine in the sense of what they can do and what they can achieve under horrendous circumstances, of course, but we really got brought out of the broom cupboard during that period of time.
We did, and shoved back in again.
Somehow we've gone back in again. And I was thinking, okay, how on earth did that happen? Because there was so much noise around payroll. And I think it's bringing that. Some of it's definitely stayed. And ultimately, people such as Ian and myself and multiple others in the industry keep banging the drum. It's different in different organisations. Fully appreciate it's needed. It's got its place in some organisations, not in others. Absolutely fair enough. But as a profession and a strategic partner of the business, I totally agree with Ian, and we'll keep fighting the cause.
Yeah, I do think there's one other thing that we actually do need to do that is going to help it. If you look at LinkedIn, for example, the payroll industry is not even recognized as an industry or a profession. There are ranch handlers in there. There are all kinds of oil riggers and all of that kind of stuff. Payroll is not a profession. And until payroll is recognized as a profession, we are going to carry on struggling.
And that's a cautionary kind of a comment right at the end. But I think broadly speaking, the conversation today has been really positive because there are opportunities there. I've heard it from both of you guys. There's some work that the payroll industry needs to do itself, but it's been really fascinating just getting a little bit of some hot takes from Ian and then also some hot takes from Tricia. Tricia, thank you very much for co-hosting with me today.
Very welcome. Thank you very much.
Ian, lovely to have you on, and we'll definitely get you back on to chew the fat about other topics, I'm sure, no doubt.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure. I'll always talk payroll.
Yes, always talk payroll. And so will we always talk payroll. Hopefully you've enjoyed this podcast as much as we've enjoyed recording it. If you'd like to find out more about some of the work that we do in payroll, if you'd like to read some of our blogs, we've got a payroll white paper, which looks at the foundations of payroll at the moment, which is on our website. You just need to go to the insights section. You can find all of this information and more. But from myself for now, thank you very much for listening. And from myself and Tricia and Ian, we hope to catch you next time on the HR on the Offensive podcast. Bye-bye.